I am Batimanka Some. As Ed said, I'm the regional representative for Ccrp West Africa. And it's my honor to moderate this session. Equity and inclusion are core principles in Ccrp, and they are key components of the McKnight Foundation's diversity, equity, and inclusion position. It's interesting because the very first sentence of the Ccrp vision and mission page reads as follows, quote, Ccrp works to ensure a world where all have access to nutritious food that is sustainably produced by all people, unquote. To be an effective participant to a local food production chain, all able and willing people need to be included in an equitable manner. Hence the relevance of addressing gender equity and inclusion in Ccrp and more specifically in FRNs. So today we'll have 5 speakers, hoping that all of them have access to the internet. I know one was having challenges. So we will not have any presentation. I have tailored questions specifically to each speaker who will kindly share answers based on their own experience. So the first person I would like to start with is Dr. Hannatu Musa Umaru. Hannatu is around, and she's an agronomist from the Niger National Agronomic Institute called INRAN. Since 2015, she's been working with the Women's Field Project, which is a Pharma-led FRN project sponsored by the McKnight Foundation. She plays a lot of work there regarding gender integration. Hannatu, I have questions for you. And the first question is as follows. I know that to ensure effective inclusion of women in accessing agricultural inputs and practices, your project rolled out a set of agroecological options to benefit them, to benefit women. Can you tell us about how you did it and what kind of challenges you faced, if any?
And Badamaka, I'll play the first video now, right?
Please, if she's not around, you share it.
Yep, 1 second.
Okay. So actually, it looks like Hannatu cannot access the internet. So Joel will share the answer she provided.
I am Hannatu Musa, working with FEMA Gaskia, which is the Farmers Federation in Maradi, and I am working on Women's Field Project. This is the first project led by this farmers organization. So thank you for this first question, which is on how to ensure effective inclusion of women in assessing agricultural input. So since we are working with women, and all these farmers we are working with are subsistence-oriented farmers. Among them, 53 are women, and they are the most vulnerable group. So to ensure their inclusion and to make this agroecological intensification option to benefit women, we are conducting trials with women, and all these options that we are using, we are making sure that they are low cost, they are simple to apply, and they don't require any skill to apply them. The first option that I will talk is OGA, which is fermented human urine. So this OGA, the women doesn't need any skill or any cost to collect it and apply it. For the one part of the question is the challenges we face on using this OGA or making this woman to apply to use this OGA. So at the first, women are reluctant. Some women are reluctant to use OGA as fertilizer. But when they saw the result on the field, not only women, but also men use OGA. Nowadays, both members and the non-members of Pharma Gaskia are using OGA in their field. And they are also using it, innovating this OGA by using it to water the compost, by using it to as pesticide on their field, and also it's a source of income.
Interesting. So if you trash urine somewhere in Maradi, in the Maradi region, is used for sale and for application in farms. Thank you very much. The second question I asked Hanatu was, the women's field project membership is mostly 53%, but we all know that women as a category is not a homogeneous reality. What specific measures did you take to make sure that the project is not creating intra-gender inequities by including those who are privileged and potentially letting out or letting behind those who need it most?
Thank you again, Patamaka, for this second question. To make sure that we didn't exclude any social group or women on this project, right from the beginning, we use social classes in conducting the trial. We classify women based on their wealth, like young ladies, elderly ladies with health, and elderly ladies without health. And the results show that there is differences in these classes. For some results, we saw that these young ladies, they have a higher yield, and the other, for some other resources, is just even ladies without help who got high yield. And when we saw there are differences between these classes, Pharma Gaskia, together with this women with field project, we initiated the typology of the farmers, so that we can analyze and interpret our result based on the typology and come out with many options by context.
Thank you so much. So I see that social classification is used as a means for equitable inclusion in the group. That's great. The last question is the following. Do you have gender equity and inclusion approaches you would like to share with us?
Thank you again, Batamaka, for giving me the opportunity to share our approaches on women inclusion and equity. I already talked about the typology in my second question. So this typology will allow Pharma Gaskia to know its members, to know the group they have among its members based on the wealth they have. So if any project come to work with Pharma Gaskia, they can look at the result of this typology, and the base of on the objective of the project can choose the group of farmers he want to work with. The second approach is the freedom of choice. Since Pharma Gaskia has a large basket of options, so it gives to its farmers the freedom to choose the option they want to test based on their need, the reality, and also the wealth they have. their need, maybe they can need one variety or choose one variety over another variety, or they can use one option against another option, or they can use based on the wealth. Maybe they can combine some options like oga with wood ash, oga with seed ball, and all other options like oga also with compost. So they have the freedom to choose. And also we have developed the participatory evaluation. This gives women the freedom to talk, to give us feedback about the options they have already tested, and it help us in planning the next year and in knowing what our farmers like. So that is what the approaches we are using to assure inclusion and the equity amongst our members.
Thank you very much, Anatu. I wish Anatu succeeds to join us to answer any questions. The next person will be Frank Chua. Frank Chua is a lecturer in Rural Development and Extension at Bunda College, Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. This is Malawi. His focus is on supporting farmer-centered approaches, specifically farmer research networks. He's involved in 3 projects funded by the Magnite Foundation. And Frank is here to share with us their experience on gender and inclusion issues. Thank you very much, Frank, for being with us. In your work with the many CRP projects, what power relationships have you had the chance to observe within FRNs?
Yeah, thank you very much, Batamaka. Looking at power relations and working with the farmers in research, what I've come to observe is that these power relations are actually dynamic. There are some gender groups that have more power than others within the groups. And then there are also some gender groups that where they are given space, they actually begin to gain power whilst others lose the power. So as a matter of beginning that is very dynamic, we can't just point it as one way. We have seen issues where we are choosing treatment to be included in the experimentation, where we've seen power issues emerging between men and women. Which treatment should be included? Is it soya or groundnuts? When it is to do with income as an interest, or pigeon pea for food, and so fertility improvement? We'll see that sometimes men may tend to dominate the discussion and their crops get their way as treatment. We've seen the power dynamics coming out between the youth and the elderly, especially when we're looking at issues of motivation to participate. So we're seeing the youth being interested when the research has some economic sense, when they see that what you're doing has connection to helping them make income. On the other hand, the elderly being interested to participate because they want to gain recognition in the groups or as a source of power within the community. Also, the area speaker spoke about the social stratification in terms of the better off and the poor. So for example, when we come to making a choice on the treatments, like how many plots should be included in an experiment, what we have observed is that the better off are comfortable with the many plots, whilst the poor who don't have enough land and the labor tend to go for 2 plots as maximum, while the others can go up to 6, 7 plots and treatments. So those manifest themselves. Again, the power dynamics have been observed in terms of experience. So we have those who are just joining the Pharma research networks and those who have been there, worked with us for quite some years. And what we see is that the depth of data that farmers want to collect is not constant. As farmers who have more experience in research, they start looking for more data. Unlike those who are just joining, who are new, they will just want to focus on simple variables to be collected. And finally, are those of cultural setup. The setup in the different areas that you are working, like we have in the southern region where we have the matrilineal system, and in the northern region of Malawi we have the patrilineal system. What it comes is that it has issues to do with the power on control of land resources such as land. So the women in the patrilineal system do not have much that control on the resources on land. And when it comes to choosing where to place the experiment, these issues, the cultural issues, tend to come up and therefore affecting. So there's a case in one of the areas where women were deliberately given a plot that was virgin land so that they should remove the logs and do the work for the chief. And in the second year, when they wanted to come and plow the plot again for the follow-up experiment, the chief refused, say you cannot use this land. So the women were basically used in the first year as a matter of just clearing the land, and they could not continue with their experiment. So basically, those are the power issues that are very dynamic, and they manifest themselves differently in different forms within the Pharma research network. That's what I've said. Yeah, back to you, Batamak.
This is very fascinating, Frank, and it looks like they're not just dynamic, it looks like they're also very unstable. So interesting.
Indeed.
Thank you. My next question is, is there any gender equity and inclusion theme you observed in any of the projects you work that you'd like to share with us or to address today?
Yeah, there are quite a number, and the area colleague talked about them, but I'll basically focus on three. And these basically are things that when we talk of inclusion in the FRN, as to take it forward, we have to consider first the need to identify strategies for inclusive selection of participants. So how do we select participants is an issue, is a theme. So the idea that the self-selection may naturally occur where we're going to, if we just go in the community and select farmers, and therefore we're going to achieve inclusion, it may not be right in some contexts, because in some contexts, this broad selection tend to systematically or naturally favor those who have power, in most cases men, or those who have the social status in the community. So we need to deliberately put in place strategies that will help us in selecting those who don't have the voice and the power in the community. For example, using participatory village social and wealth ranking exercise. The second one is to really develop and adapt facilitation tools that fit different gender categories. So usually we have one set of facilitation tools of engaging the farmers, yet they have different powers. And from our observation, we have seen that many of the facilitation tools that are available are those that tend to favor the powerful community members in the community, and those who are less privileged are left out in this participatory process. So how do we develop strategies and tools that we bring on board everyone, despite having different power within the community? Finally, is really, as I said, that the power is dynamic and it's changing. What we need, therefore, are tools that should help us to monitor, tools and methods that we should be able to monitor, just like the way we monitor performance of programs. But the other thing we need to be monitoring in the FRNs is how the power issues are changing amongst the different categories, gender categories, the poor, the women. How much are we involving them, and be able to track that as we do our activities. And that will call for adapted tools that are participatory, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, focusing on the inclusion aspect. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Frank. It's such a pleasure listening to you.
Welcome.
The next guest will be Nora Asio. I guess Nora is around. Nora is a very experienced farmer. She has worked with farmers for 28 years and participated in various research projects with universities and research institutions. Nora is the chairperson and PI of a Ccrp funded project called PICWI FRN. The PICWI FRN project focuses on cassava sanitation. That is the cleaning, the planting, multiplication, and promotion of disease-free cassava cuttings. The project has a strong youth and women involvement, and we are so privileged to have Nora here. Thank you, Nora. My first question, if you're ready, is since your project focuses on cassava phytosanitation, there is obviously a nutrition and monetary aspect involved in it. Did you identify any struggles or competitions about access to the opportunity based on gender, age, or status?
Yes, thank you, Batamaka. There are a lot of struggles. There is a lot of competition, especially when you come to the gender issues and the cultural issues, which are really found in most of the African families. You find that, like Frank has just spoken, culture can tend to sort of tie a lot of things around gender. And one of them is if you do not own the land, then you do not have a voice to put a demonstration in a certain place. And sometimes when even you have been allowed to put a demonstration, maybe as a lady, you may find that when the results are analyzed and so on, you may not make a choice where to put this result, where to do the next activity. So that one has been really part of the power struggle. And then, of course, there's the other one over dowry. In most of the African families, women are married. So you find that if you are a married woman, looks like you're part of the possession. So in other words, you have to listen to certain things that your husband tells you. And if you just say no, that one brings about the struggle. So there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of competition, but at the same time, there's a lot of things happening in the families whereby you find that equity cannot be really resolved easily. Because if you have not been in the power, then why should you share equally? That means that you're going to take what you're given. Sometimes even you find some women, that's why you find in families, a family can have 8 children. Then you ask yourself, how did this woman produce all these 8 children, 9, 10 children? Was she really agreeing on that? So sometimes this power struggle goes even up to the inside part of the family. And you know, that is very dangerous when it comes to the FRN work. Because if you are together to do some of these things, and then the woman is sometimes the one who does a lot of this work, especially labor in the farm, and she doesn't understand what should be done in the farm, then you find that she'll always do practices that will cause more problems to really agriculture in that family. And cassava for us is like a staple food crop in the family. And cassava to us, when you have cassava, it means that you can even start your own homestead and be able to feed the family. It's like a security food crop in my region, so that when you have it, it means that you can find other things easily, but as long as you have cassava, which is stores for long in your household. So it is really an issue, and I feel that we have really to find all possible ways of addressing it, of talking about it, of elaborating things, and possibly many stories might help to elevate some of these issues.
Wow, that's so interesting. And Nora, I didn't know that cassava had that position in the area you are. Thank you for clarifying that to me. My second question is, as a woman, a veteran farmer working with the Ccrp and a principal investigator, what action did you take to facilitate gender integration, as well as the consideration of equity and inclusion within your projects?
We've taken so many different actions to try to address those issues. And one of them is when we are having some work going on in the FRN, we make sure that we try even to come up with a quota system, meaning that there are certain plots, demonstrations where you find that 60% is women, meaning that in that area, we want more women to be there so that they can learn. Also, we try to do a lot of observation so that once you see the women are not participating, the youth are not participating, maybe the other gender, like old people, are sleeping. So you have to find a way of separating these people and talking to them in different places so that you can get their views into the system. We also try as much as possible to use what we call, we normally call it the family approach. And the reason why we call it the family approach is because we want to have them, the husband, the children, and also the mothers as members of the FRN, so that once in a while, when we train people on how to plan, we want to see in that model family approach, do these people plan? What is that a woman has put in? What is that the family, the other people, like the young people, the children, the youth, what is their contribution in that planning? And if they have planned it together and they are going to do it together, what about the benefiting? Are they benefiting equally? Is the woman also having a voice? Or it is a woman to go to the garden and then the man to go and sell? We want to really to look into that very seriously and see that everybody is actually included. That's why we are talking about this inclusion. There are issues like today, there's a lot of problem as we are transitioning towards agroecology. And me as a farmer PI, the truth is I'm not really that person who has gone to do research, but I've learned research with the researchers together in the farm. And as a PI for the farmer group that I really head down this way, I try as much as possible to make sure that these women contribute towards what we are doing. And when it comes to benefiting, we want to see how these women are benefiting. We want also to track how these women are really getting towards that benefit, especially if it means that we must know what these women are getting. We even try to use what we call a merry-go-round to make sure that today we are in Mr. Batamaka's family, and we want to know what is that you bought for your wife this year, what's that good thing, so that we can recognize and celebrate it together as a families, that we are now getting towards including everybody in what we are doing. So those are the few things that we are doing on the ground to make sure that inclusion is taken in.
Wow. Nora, I'm only sorry I couldn't see your picture because I can feel the excitement in your voice. That's great. And you mentioned something very important about the family approach. Where you mentioned the husband, the mother, and the children. Beyond this, I also see something like an effort for social cohesion, starting at the family level. And I believe it is very important because it can be a reason for avoiding gender-based violence at the domestic level. Thank you very much. My last question is, what advice would you provide to your fellow PIs and to the Ccrp regarding gender equity and attributes of women and youth inclusion in FRNs?
Actually, to my fellow PIs, and especially the researchers and maybe Ccrp at large, I would really say that the state of affairs we have gone into really needs gender inclusion to be taken as a serious matter. Because to me, if we do not take it as a serious issue, even the transitioning we are moving towards agroecology will be a bit difficult, because if only one gender gets to learn what to do, and the other gender goes to do something different, it means that we shall not actually get wherever we want to go. I also advise them that surely if they are really thinking much about gender inclusion, there should be a way designed to support this kind of activity. Because if you just leave the FRNs to do it, sometimes I have seen these power issues. Men will always tend to think, these women have not gone to school, so they cannot chair. These women have not gone to school, so they cannot collect data. But if we get into it and take it up as one of the things that we want really to implement, that means we really have to go in and come up with approaches that can be used to really cost us gender inclusion in most of our FRN activities.
Wow. You know, what you say reminds me of what I saw in Frank's video about the initial perception about farmers' inability to do research, and you're pointing it the other way, but for women, in terms of leadership and stuff like that in FRNs. It was such a pleasure having you, Nora. Certainly you'll have questions and people are reacting already. The next person is Dr. Cecilia Perrin. Cecilia is an interdisciplinary scientist and a specialist in Andean agricultural systems. She's currently the leader of the livestock and mountain socio-ecosystem research at Instituto de Montaña in Peru. Cecilia's rich professional experience includes teaching in higher education institutions and providing expertise to various international organizations, including the FAO and the World Bank. Within the Ccrp and this community of practice, Cecilia is the lead person of the Gender and Diversity Open Space. And this space promotes the integration of gender approaches in projects. She is also PI of the Puñas Agua project. Cecilia, we are so happy to have you here. First question. You operate in a sociocultural and socio-ecological space known rightly or wrongly for its machismo culture and the discrimination of Andean indigenous people. How did the Gender and Diversity Open Space Group go about addressing the issue of gender, equity, and inclusion?
Thank you. I'm going to answer your question in Spanish.
Okay.
Sí, bueno, sobre la pregunta, ¿cómo integramos el tema de machismo y de discriminación en el proyecto Puñas Agua? Hemos identificado el problema de la tenencia de la tierra por parte de las mujeres y el tema de la participación en las membresías de las comunidades. Las mujeres no son sujetos para ser directamente miembros de la comunidad y solamente lo hacen a través de los maridos, de las parejas, o si son hijas o si quedan viudas, de esa manera. Y por lo tanto el tema de la tierra también es una limitante, porque para ser parte de ser comunero es tener acceso a la tierra, ¿no? Entonces, ser miembro oficial de la tierra, ser miembro oficial de la comunidad te da acceso a la tierra. En estas comunidades en las que estamos trabajando, en Huaraz, en Ancash, en la Sierra Norte del Perú, hay esa realidad de género. Y bueno, ¿cómo estamos afrontando eso? Estamos incluyendo en el diseño de la investigación cómo incluir eso, cómo evaluar las normas de género que se tienen en la comunidad y ver cómo se puede sensibilizar y trabajar estos temas. Este proyecto, esta fase empezó en inicio del 2020. Bueno, como hemos estado en años de pandemia, todavía estamos en ese proceso de entender cómo es las normas de género, la organización en esos temas, para poder brindar un mejor apoyo en ese aspecto, pero también entendiendo de que es una limitante transversal a todo lo que es las transiciones agroecológicas, ¿no? Eso por un lado, y bueno, y el otro lado que es que trabajamos con comunidades, bueno, con familias que si bien tienen acceso a la tierra, no tienen la propiedad de la tierra. Entonces, esto hace que no puedan decidir mucho sobre el futuro de la tierra, ¿no? Entonces, esto limita de alguna manera su capacidad de decisión sobre cómo van a mejorar los recursos naturales de esas tierras que son comunitarias. Sí lo pueden hacer en aquellas tierras que tienen acceso directo o de propiedad que son fuera de la comunidad. Sobre el tema de discriminación, bueno, ese es un tema que lo venimos abordando, además de ser investigadora principal del proyecto Punasawa, también tenemos un grupo pequeño dentro del Ccrp Andes de investigadoras, principalmente más que investigadores, pero investigadoras interesadas en justo cómo atender estos problemas de género y sobre todo también de inclusión, ¿no? Entendiendo que estamos en un contexto andino donde hay mucha discriminación. Entonces, ese ha sido un tema de conversación también en el último Ccrp Andes que tuvimos en julio del 2021, donde cómo podemos hacer o cómo nos proyectamos para poder hacer incidencia, ¿no? A nivel de políticas, considerando que pertenecemos a países, Ecuador, Perú y Bolivia, que tienen un sesgo, ¿no? de parte del desarrollo agrario dentro de los ministerios de agricultura, que no, si bien valoran la agricultura andina, no así tanto al agricultor andino, ¿no? O sea, lo que representa, sobre todo, bueno, en el Perú, hemos pasado este año, hemos tenido cambios políticos importantes donde hay un nuevo grupo de poder que es más de antecedentes campesinos y donde ha exacerbado justo estas diferencias entre lo campesino, lo andino y lo rural, lo de la ciudad, perdón, lo urbano, lo de la ciudad, que ha polarizado el país, ¿no? Y en ese contexto hacer incidencia para nosotros es un desafío. No tenemos las respuestas, pero estamos justo en la búsqueda de eso, de cómo vemos que eso de cierta manera limita, porque los grupos de poder que siempre han controlado la agricultura en el Perú no son inclusivos, no incluyen a estos grupos, esta agricultura agroecológica, andina, y sobre todo por lo que representa, ¿no? Yo puedo contar una anécdota chiquita de cuando yo soy zootecnista en mi primera formación. Entonces yo hice un trabajo sobre camélidos, sobre carne de camélidos, sobre carne de alpaca. Y cuando me tocó el tema de vender carne de alpaca porque ya la había producido, había mucha gente de Lima, de la ciudad, que me decía que ellos no iban a comprar porque esa es carne de gente de la sierra, carne de la gente andina, ¿no? Y que ellos se ofendían, pero lo más gracioso era que la gente se ofendía como si le estuviera proponiendo, no sé, algo, algo terrible. Y entonces, y ahí uno se da cuenta en esas pequeñas cosas que hay un desprecio por lo andino muy marcado, sobre todo en Lima, desde que Lima es bueno, es una ciudad, la ciudad es la capital del país, que es muy, digamos, tiene mucho legado colonial todavía mentalmente, ¿no? Entonces, no es inclusivo el país en varios aspectos, ¿no? Uno es el tema de la digamos, de la gente que proviene de la sierra, de la gente andina, y en el Perú la mayoría, como yo, todos muchos provenimos de la región andina, pero hay como un sesgo, una discriminación que impide también eso, que se llegue a políticas reales, ¿no? Y bueno, y si hablamos encima de discriminación, y la discriminación de la mujer andina es mucho peor, ¿no? O sea, tiene menos limitantes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cecilia. The second question, and I'll ask you for just for 2 minutes because we still have one speaker. What major challenge or challenges, or I'll take one. What major challenge did you face, and what lesson did you learn that you would like to share here? I know when you were speaking, we saw some of the challenges, but can you emphasize one that you would like to share? Thanks.
Yo creo que el principal desafío que tenemos es que todavía el tema de género y de inclusión, bueno, ahora ya se está hablando mucho más el tema de inclusión, no se tocaba antes, porque aparentemente para mucha gente hay mucha negación o es de repente muy doloroso tratar sobre estos temas, pero ya se están hablando, es sanador para muchos tratarlo en muchos espacios. Entonces, el desafío para mí casi viene junto lo que es género e inclusión, es que haya un entendimiento transversal, ¿no? De lo que es esto de que género e inclusión, y lo hablo desde el trabajo en campo, el trabajo en las comunidades, el trabajo con el equipo investigador. Por ejemplo, hay que estar constantemente refrescándole el tema de género. De repente el tema de inclusión lo tienen más claro, pero el tema de género cuesta mucho, hay que estar constantemente recordándoles. Bueno, el tema de género institucional es otro tema, y el tema de género, digo, en tener las capacidades y las herramientas. Frank creo que también lo mencionaba, ¿no? Uno de los desafíos es tener las herramientas. En este grupo que tenemos en el Ccrp Andes, donde nos hemos encontrado varias investigadoras principalmente, donde decimos esto, o sea, ya lo identificamos, ya estamos en el gender sensitive, en el gender aware, en el gender, o sea, ya estamos a ese nivel, lo identificamos, visualizamos los gender gaps, las brechas de género, pero ¿cuál es el siguiente paso? O sea, en identificar no nos podemos quedar, ¿no? O sea, y para eso, conversando entre todas, hemos dado cuenta que nos faltan herramientas. ¿Qué herramientas? O sea, para dar ese paso para hacer un gender más transformative, ¿no? Un gender más transformador, donde se logren ese empoderamiento que se busca, y eso tal vez sí estaríamos requiriendo para que sea transversal, para que todos tengamos ese mismo encuentro de salir de ese nivel que hemos alcanzado, del techo que ya se alcanzó, de ser sensible a género, a trabajar por tomar acciones. Eso sería.
Thank you very much. And it's very important to move from the steps to the action, as you say. And I wish you the best, and we'll be very happy to follow what you're doing there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, our last speaker, Anthony, and not the least, of course. Anthony, are you around? Oh, yes. So Anthony is a technical specialist in food safety research at the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, where he currently supports the design and implementation of food safety research activities in food markets in sub-Saharan Africa. His background is in the application of pharma research networks and community-based participatory research methods for mycotoxin management.
There's a few
Smallholder farmer communities.
You might have to get some out of the freezer.
One good thing about Anthony is that he does not work with our organization. Does not work with in the Ccrp region, nor with Ccrp project. So he's coming in with a perspective that does not derive from our project. Thank you very much, Anthony, for being around. And I'll first ask you to tell us about the work you do, the way you go about gender diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm sorry that I'll be pressuring you because we only have a few minutes left. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here and to share my experiences. And for the sake of time, I'll try to be very brief, but I do hope I can shed light on some key conclusions and considerations from my own experience. So today I'll be focusing a lot on my work with farmers to establish a farmer research network called Kisan in Uttar Pradesh, India. In northern India. And this farmer research network was established to respond to the farmers' desire to address issues of food safety and food preservation with a specific focus on the management of mycotoxin exposure risk in these Indian food systems. So over time, the network, Kisan, has identified and tested a number of food safety solutions that emerged from the community's own identified needs. And one of the key solutions that we really had focused on in Kisan has been hermetic grain storage bags. And so I'll be using that sort of as an underlying example for our discussion today. So these bags, for example, are in direct response to the reality that many of the smallholder farmers in this region are plagued annually by spoilage pests and molds in their grain storage systems, which can jeopardize not only the food security and nutrition of these farmers and their families, but also the economic viability of their farming operations, which is, of course, a very important consideration and motivator for many of these farmers. Important to note is that Kisan, the FRN that I've been a part of, consists of men as well as women and cuts across very important local social and cultural barriers in the North Indian context. Caste systems and socioeconomic statuses are very important determinants of power in decision-making and in the way actions and desires are expressed. Just for example, in general terms, in many of these communities, men have systematically more decision-making power over their household decisions than women. And in many households, the women in the household are expected to defer to the head of the household, often the man. In my conversations with many of the women farmers, they actually regard their husbands or the men's opinion as their very own and choose not even to reveal or advocate for their own perspectives. And when you think about food safety or mycotoxins in particular, the women's opinion, the women's voice is very, very important because they're often the ones in the household that are tasked with preparing the food for the household and for nourishing their children who might be at highest vulnerability for adverse nutrition outcomes that are associated with mycotoxins and with other food safety concerns. So whereas these are very important and rich considerations, motivation for participating in a research project about grain might actually be done with the intention of economic prosperity, because maybe that's the economic or the motivating factor for men who might be having systematically more power to voice their opinions and to shape the trajectory of a Pharma Research Network project. So I've been trying really concertedly to be responsive to these needs and to understand that while this diversity in the demographic makeup of the FRN is intentional, it also comes together with really distinct challenges for ensuring that the mission and objectives of the Pharma Research Network can capture everybody's equally important perspective, even those that are the most marginalized in the community. So my approach to gender and diversity and equity in the Pharma Research Network environment really is centered at that space, at the research space, the process of that deep local learning. And I really try to make sure that all of that learning starts with a foundation of collective identity, where all people who participate in the Pharma Research Network are mobilized around some shared interests, some common understanding of the goals that we want to set out to achieve that are not only viable as research targets, but also that are responsive to the full breadth of need and want that is reflected in the population that's participating. And so I think I'm taking too much time already, but one thing that I really want to drive home is that this collective identity can be built up by activities that promote unity and that reinforce these common goals throughout the process from start to finish. For example, in my work in India, we had embarked on a process of naming the FRN, actually giving that group its own identity that was, born of a democratic process where people got to contribute their ideas for what they wanted it to be and what the outcomes they needed. I know I don't have time to discuss all the many manifestations of that process, but one last point that I want to make on this from my experience is that a key part of my FRN philosophy and practice, and this is something that's come out very strongly with my peers here on this call and also throughout this event, is that we need to be really sensitive in the research process to defining meaningful metrics of success. This is a really fundamental part of my own process to ensure that research conducted must be conducted in a way that empowers the farmer by revealing those key relationships between the project's goals and their lived experience, the things that actually mean something to them and that will improve their livelihood. So in my work, we consider many equity barriers such as gender and caste and literacy, and we actually integrate those within the context of evaluative systems, making sure that if we have the intention of doing a research project, that it actually produces an outcome that's equally or more meaningful to the most marginalized communities as it is to the least marginalized communities. I think I just want to leave you with that point that it's very important in these very diverse and inherently heterogeneous networks that we are very sensitive to the role that data systems play in shaping the usefulness, the meaningfulness of the research output. So we should always be careful about not over-prescribing metrics of success on communities, but rather letting the communities themselves build up their own paradigm for what they want to see and how they can measure that with their own tools. Thank you.
Wow. Anthony, I love your last sentence. I love everything you said, but the last sentence is so powerful. Oh yeah, thank you very much. I wish we had more time because I would have loved you to tell us some of our strengths or weaknesses you spotted. But we have only 4 minutes left. I will give the space to people to maybe voice a few questions for people to answer. But I really appreciate your participation. Thank you very much. And your findings were so exciting to listen to. Joel, any question that you think is burning?
We've had many of the questions responded to already in the chat.
Okay, great. Anybody who has a burning question who would like to address it? Well, if nobody is speaking, I'll probably give the floor back to any of the speakers. Maybe Anthony. Anthony, can you answer my question now? And you have 2 minutes to do it. I ask you, are there any strengths or weaknesses you spotted in the experience shared by the speakers of Ccrp sponsored projects?
Yes. Well, I can't speak to any weaknesses because I've been so amazed by the rich work that's being done. But some of the real strong points that I've been able to absorb over this event has been really that it's very clear that what's happening in Ccrp, these programs, is that the learning priorities of the farmers are always being honored. And that's, as you know, consistent with what I was just saying. I think that's really, really critical. And I've been really pleased to see all that in all of the talks throughout this event. And one thing that I think was it that Frank was saying earlier on this panel was that the management of power dynamics in these systems is incredibly important. And I think everyone who's spoken today has made a nod to the importance of power dynamics. And I think that some of the solutions and methods that have been presented really reveal that there's a lot of elegance in the way that pharma research networks can tackle these really complex dynamics. So I think that's all. That's all for me.
Thank you so much, Anthony, and thank you all of the speakers. You are great. You did great, and you know the themes you brought in are so burning. And because it's recorded, I think we will draw a lot out of them. I'm sorry I cannot take time to go through everybody's speech again, but I really appreciated you being here. It was so fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. And that's it.
Yeah, this concludes today's session. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great
And we'll see you tomorrow for the last day.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks,
Batamaka.
Thank you, Batamaka.
Thank you, Batamaka.
Thank
Thank you,
Batamaka. Thank you.
So beautiful. Thank you, Batamaka. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Uh-huh.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.